Hello and welcome to my new office slash filming and recording area. I'm going to be doing most of my video reviews in here, and I'm turning things around a little bit just so I can show you guys my new setup. Obviously I have lots still to organize and figure out, but this is sort of the first video for that. And to kick things off, we have the Sennheiser HD800s. Now, most of you either have already heard this headphone or know a lot about it, and you're coming to this video because you want to know my opinion on it or whether or not it lines up with your opinion. And so, to cut right to the chase, I'm going to say that yes, I do like it. I am very impressed with its technical abilities. However, I also think that with the Sennheiser HD800s and even the HD800, while it performs really well, there's a risk of it potentially being a little bit boring. And so a lot of this video I'm going to focus on the comparison between the HD800s and the ZMF Verite, because I actually think that they are weirdly similar in spite of the fact that they have totally different tunings. So to begin with, the HD800s, let's talk about build quality and comfort. The build quality is good. I really love the way that this little click works, and it's a very light headphone, probably one of the lightest flagships out there. And as a result, the comfort is also exceptional. I feel like there's a bigger risk of something being damaged on this over time. You say you drop it down or on something and you could probably scratch it. So the build quality, I'll give it a B+, but the comfort is an A+ for sure. This is one of the most comfortable headphones and lightest headphones and that you could possibly use, and even better, it doesn't get hot around your ears. It's actually very open feeling, not just open sounding. For performance, this is again quite good. We all know about the soundstage and instrument separation and imaging of this headphone, and yeah, it's amazing. The one thing I will say is that what surprised me most about this is the speed is actually really good. I was expecting that to be its weakest quality, but after a while you do recognize that there is quite good speed on here as well. It's very fast and tight and punchy. Well, I say that. The dynamic slam here is more of a dynamic slap, and that's partially because the bass isn't quite... In fact, the bass just isn't really that good. But still, I'm impressed with how well it performs on the detail retrieval front and on the speed front, and of course the staging and the imaging. From a tonality perspective, it's also pretty good. It almost lines up with what I like. It lacks a lot of the bass presence. Now, it does have more bass than the HD800, but as many of you know, a lot of that is what people call a second harmonic distortion. So it's kind of faking bass a little bit. And if you compare the HD800s with something like the Odyssey LCD4, it becomes very clear that the LCD4 has way better bass detail retrieval. And on that front, the HD800s, while it has exceptional instrument separation and definition for the images, and they come out of nowhere, again, it's that blackness of background that everybody talks about, you know this, it doesn't actually have as good detail retrieval capabilities as both the Utopia and the LCD4. Both of those, if you listen to individual tones, individual instruments, not necessarily complex layerings and stuff like that, where the imaging really shines on the HD800s, but the individual instruments, say just even a piano, for example, the detail is better represented by both the LCD4 and the Utopia. And I would actually go as far as to say that for certain instruments and vocals, the ZMF Verite does a better job than the HD800s as well. I actually think that the HD800s and the Verite are very similar. The HD800s has better tonal balance in the treble, and therefore it wins out on clarity, and then also it has better separation qualities with a slightly bigger soundstage, and so some of the detail is easier to pinpoint and identify as it comes out of, you know, the various different places where the layering occurs. And the Verite kind of pushes things together a little bit more. But again, the individual tones, individual instruments, I really don't hear that much of a difference, and I actually think for some the Verite is better. In fact, I consider the HD800s and the Verite to be two sides of the same coin. The HD800s brightens things up a little bit in the treble, and the ZMF Verite focuses things more towards the lower mid-range and the bass. And so for the Verite, you get better clarity for vocals, certain vocals, and for the HD800S, you get better clarity for things like pianos. A lot of jazz music actually sounds amazing on this. Classical music, again, as we all know, sounds amazing on this. Whereas some of the brighter music hits with more authority on the Verite. It feels more engaging. And ultimately, that's the issue that I have with the HD800S. There is a tendency for it to sound a little bit boring, especially when you compare it to something like a ZMF Verite or an EQ'd LCD4. Those headphones have just such a rich and engaging quality to them, and they don't lose out on detail retrieval capabilities because of their warmer tonality. By all accounts, this is a neutral bright headphone. The HD800S is a neutral bright headphone with a bit of futzing of the bass to try and emulate some bass, extra bass energy. And to me, after listening to the LCD4 and even the Verite, it's not quite doing it for me. The bass response is my least favorite part about the HD800S. I've heard the HD800, and yes, there is more bass here on the HD800S, but it's just as Tile said, there is a little bit of that distortion, second harmonic distortion. And when you compare it to the LCD4, the LCD4 is clearly more detailed in the bass, and even the Verite is also more detailed in the bass. And I'd go as far as to say the Utopia is also more detailed in the bass. So while on first listen, it's not lacking in overall bass emphasis, at least that's the perception. After a while, and when you're comparing it back and forth, you do recognize that it's not quite on the same level. And it's also not quite on the same level as the rest of the headphones concerned. The mid-range is fine. It's a little bit dry. It's a little bit boring. This is probably where I personally prefer a little bit more of a mid-range emphasis, especially with vocals. And again, this is where the Verite is my preference. And then in the treble, the HD800S is phenomenal. It fixes a lot of what was wrong with the HD800, at least in my mind, with the 6K peak. And there's also thankfully no sibilance. Some people have described this as sibilant, not at the 8.5K hertz painful sibilance region. This is not a problem on this headphone like it is on some of the Behrs. It's still bright, but it's not quite piercing and painful. The other amazing thing about the treble here is that you do get a lot of air, and you're not sacrificing tonal balance like you are on the LCD4. There's a lot of openness, and it just feels very natural in the treble as a result. So in my mind, the best quality of the HD800S is the treble, even though, yeah, the mid-range is fine. It's not special like it is on some other headphones. If you own one of those warmer headphones like the Verite or like some of the Mr. Speaker stuff like the Ether 2, something that's a bit thicker and richer, this is a good complementary headphone to those. It does an excellent job at providing that clarity that some of those might be missing. You get sort of sucked into that warmth blanket, and this lets you kind of get out from that, and it's sort of again that breath of fresh air that I liked with some of the Hi-Fi Man stuff. But speaking of the Hi-Fi Man stuff, I had said in my review of the Aria that it's almost like a planar magnetic HD800S, and I think that's true, and I would actually take the Aria over this, and that's because the Aria does bass quite a bit better than the HD800S. And for whatever reason, it just to me sounds more engaging. There's more of that lifelike quality to it. It's maybe not quite as clinical and boring. So the bottom line, as far as my opinion of the HD800S goes, is that if you are looking for something extremely clinical at the risk of it being a little bit boring, this is a good option. In fact, this is probably the best option for certain applications. However, I would still take the Hi-Fi Man Aria over this, and I would still take the ZMF Verite over this. In fact, I think the Verite is a warmer version of the HD800S, and that's kind of what I like. Now, I EQ the Verite, And when you do EQ them to be kind of close to one another, which is very difficult to do, to be honest, the HD800s does show that it has better separation. And if that's a priority, this is still going to be the better option. But if you want that tonal richness and that euphonic character of some of the ZMF headphones, to me, it becomes obvious which one I prefer. And I think a lot of people, if they were to just compare one to the other, they'd be impressed by this, but go with the Verite. I mean, there's certain tracks where the HD800S, things just sound shrill on it. And as much as for a lot of the music that I listen to, it sounds amazing, there's also some tracks that just sound like absolute dog shit on this. So for me, it's a good headphone to have in your arsenal, but not the best headphone all around. And something where these days, I think there are now lots of other options that you can get. At the end of the day, would I recommend this? I do recommend it for certain people. It doesn't actually have that many flaws, to be honest. It's just the bass that's, while present, it just is kind of lifeless. But beyond that, I don't really have too much bad to say about it, other than this is a specific application headphone. I think in the past, some people would have considered this to be a benchmark headphone, because it does come in at around like $1,600 now, and it can outperform a lot of headphones that are more expensive. And in that sense, I agree, but it is, in my mind, only for that specific application where you want the most separation and stage, and you're prioritizing clarity over musicality and engagement, and you're okay with the risk of a little bit of a lifeless sound. That's kind of my take on this. And so, yeah, I do recommend it, but only if you're the kind of person who is going to be okay with that, or specifically looking for it. Okay, that does it for this review. Thanks for taking the time to watch it, and I will see you guys in the next one.